Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into your SBL class. I hope you all are doing well. So this is second session. Last session was introductory, where we discussed the syllabus and paper and other details about the SBL. So today we are now going to start first chapter. So you can have a look at this volume 1. I have divided the SBL syllabus into 2 volumes. Like my manual is divided, my book is divided into 2 volumes, volume 1 and volume 2. This volume will cover section A, B, C, and D of the syllabus, whereas volume 2 will cover the remaining sections E, F, G, and H of the syllabus. So here is a table of content. We are starting with the section C, strategy. Although section A is leadership, section B is governance, section C is strategy, section D is risk management. Okay, but I find this more logical to start with strategy. And once you will have good understanding of strategy, you will be better able to understand the role of leadership and the role of governance, and then risk management and the subsequent topics. You will be able to understand all these very well. Okay, so we are starting with strategy. In the last class, we already have discussed in details about strategy, what is strategy, and how strategies are developed. So in this class, I will just give a quick review, a quick recap of strategy and strategy development process. I think there are some students, new students, who did not attend the last class. Are there new students today? Hello? Are there any new student? Okay. Any other student who is joining this course from this week? Okay, so what is strategy? There is no clear definition of strategy. There is no single definition of strategy. Every writer and every author has defined strategy their own way. So in our last class, I gave you a very simple definition of strategy, that strategy is the course of action selected by the organization to achieve its objectives. But if you want to learn this definition from JSW, if you want to learn this definition from JSW, Johnson, Scholes, and Whittington, then you can follow this definition. According to JSW, they are combined called JSW. They wrote a book named Exploring Corporate Strategy, very famous book in especially UK, Exploring Corporate Strategy. This is the book name. In their book, they gave this definition: strategy is direction and scope of an organization over the long term, which achieves advantage for the organization through its configuration of resources within a challenging environment to meet the needs of markets and fulfill stakeholder expectation. If you look at this definition, this is a very comprehensive and very broad definition of strategy. A very comprehensive and very broad definition of strategy. It tells you a lot of things about strategy. First of all, if we look at the bold words, strategy is direction. What is direction? Direction means We always choose direction to reach to a destination. We have a destination. Every organization has a purpose, has a vision, has a mission, has goals. So to achieve those goals, to achieve those objectives, it needs direction. So strategy is direction of the organization. Then strategy also explains scope of activities. Scope, like what type of activities we would be in. For example, we would be making mobile phones. We will be making like cars. We will be making like electronics. We will be making cement. We will be making tiles. Now this is the scope of the activities. Scope of the activities. Coca-Cola has a scope of activities. Recently, Coca-Cola has changed its scope. Okay. Similarly, Apple has a scope of activities. Google has a scope of every organization. If you look at, you would have clear understanding of the scope of their activities. So this is a part of strategy of the organization. Next point is long-term, means the direction and scope is selected for a long term. This is not just matter of like 1 week or 1 month or 1 quarter or 1 year. No, this is for long term. It may go on and on and on for, like you can say, 12 years, 20 years, 15 years, it may go on. Okay, so this is for long term, which achieves advantage. This is another point of strategy, that a strategy is the one that leads to achieving advantage for the organization. Advantage, you can call it as competitive advantage. So a strategy should help the organization to achieve strategic competitive advantage, such as you can look at BMW, Audi, Mercedes, Toyota. Every company has its own advantage in their respective field. From Mauritius, you can see, for example, Lux Cafe. Okay, it has an advantage in the market. Okay, Lux Resorts, Lux Cafe, they have an advantage. Understand? So achieving competitive advantage for the organization through its configuration of resources. Now the point is here how the organization will achieve its competitive advantage. So this is the resources. Okay, we will study resources today. So there would be different types of resources which an organization can have. So by using those resources, the organization would achieve such competitive advantage. Then in changing environment, this is another point. We know we are living in very competitive and very dynamic environment where situation is changing very fast. So this is the point, that the strategy should help the organization to achieve competitive advantage in a changing environment, to meet the needs of markets. Markets mean customers. So whatever strategy the organization has selected, it should meet the needs of its customers as well as stakeholders. Stakeholder is a very broad word. There would be stakeholder mean there are many like kind of stakeholders, or there are many groups who are interested in the organization strategy. Okay, there are investors, there are shareholders, there are potential investors, there are like employees, the top management board, there are customers, there are suppliers, there is community, there is society, there's government, and many other groups who are interested in the strategy of the organization. So this is a very interesting and very comprehensive definition of strategy. I hope you have got it clear. Then I have tried to put this definition of the strategy into questions, okay, that a strategy should answer these questions. So you can have a look at these question. These are very interesting, that a strategy should answer these questions. Okay, what is the scope of activities? Because if a strategy can't answer these questions, mean the management is not clear about strategy of the organization. So that is very important to be clear. This is very important to be clear about strategy. Everyone from top to the bottom of the organization should be clear about strategy of the organization. Even if you ask a very a lowest like operational staff, okay, if you ask a maintenance staff guy, if you ask what is our strategy, the person should know the strategy of the organization. I hope you are clear now on the definition of strategy. Then how strategies are developed, we have discussed this in detail, but here we can have a very quick look. There are three ways strategies are developed. Normally there are three ways. Okay, there are three ways. These are deliberate strategy, this is emergent strategy, and incremental strategy. So if we look at the deliberate strategy is also called top-down strategy. Top-down means this is the strategy which is designed by the top management. Top management means you can say that is the board of directors, board. So this strategy is designed by top management, or you can also say as executive management. This strategy is designed by executive management, or also called corporate management. So there is a process they follow for that strategy. They look at the mission of the organization, they look at objectives of the organization, they look at, then they analyze internal and external environment of the organization. Okay, then they look for what options we have available for this strategy. Then they choose the most suitable option, and then they implement the strategy, and then they review and control the progress of the strategy. That is also very important, very important, very important. Just like as the choosing the right strategy is important, equally important it is to review the performance of the strategy. Okay, that's very interesting point. It is equally important, I'm repeating, equally important to understand, to check, to review the progress of the strategy. Means you need to ask question here, whether our strategy is in right direction. Are we in right direction? Is our strategy achieving what we have planned and selected? So this is a very important. All right, I hope you are clear. Deliberate strategy. Then the next strategy approach is emergent strategy. Unlike deliberate strategy, which flow from top to the bottom of the organization, emergent strategy flow from bottom to the top of the organization. This is strategy, under this strategy, because it thrives from ideas. So now you can ask question where those ideas are generated. We know that those ideas are not generated on the top management heads. These ideas are mostly generated these ideas are mostly come up with the operational management. Those managers, those people, those staff who are more close with the customers, those who are more close with the on the field, those who are more close with the other stakeholders, understand, those who are in the market, those who are seeing the progress of the competitors, they know better. Okay, so they can come up with better ideas. So emergent strategy basically more flourish and thrives within an organization where a culture of entrepreneurship culture is developed, where top management encourages everyone within the organization to be creative, to be innovative, to go extra mile, to try to prototype, to develop and choose. So emergent strategy is very interesting. I gave you examples in the last class. There are so many examples of emergent strategy. Emergent strategy actually emerges from the opportunities in the external environment. So those who are looking at the external environment and keep identifying the opportunities. Then the third type of strategy is called incremental strategy. This strategy is a traditional style of strategy, and I would say that this is the last century style, because this incremental strategy approach has little space in 21st century, because in 21st century, you need to constantly reinvent your business model. So in incremental strategy, we just follow the existing approach of strategy by making small incremental changes to the existing strategy. And I told you that those small changes that are made to the existing strategy may not be sufficient to meet the bigger needs of the external environment. Okay, there might be bigger changes in the external environment, so our small improvement may not be sufficient. Ultimately, what would happen? The organization may become victim of the strategic drift. Strategic drift, yes. Strategic drift means losing direction of the organization, losing direction of the organization. That is called strategic drift. So this term has been used by SBL syllabus. So you should be also be clear that SBL syllabus has specifically mentioned strategic drifts. You should be clear about this. Okay, all right. And we are now moving on to the next topic, external environmental analysis. Before I start this topic, I would like to know if you have any question. Any question? We have discussed now a bit, so if you have a question, please feel free to ask. A good way which I recommend to my students, that you should have a pen and notebook. When I am explaining something, or when I am like mentioning something, so it happens we get to know ideas or questions. We may not be clear about something when I am explaining. So the best way is you can note down those questions and you ask me during our question pause, like a question, like during each lecture, there will be points for question. Okay, where we will stop, we will discuss, and then move on. Zahra, you have asked when will we get notes? I think you should, these notes are available, I guess, on the platform for your download. Other students have already received these notes? Hello? Have you received these notes already? Okay, no problem. These notes are already available, so you can simply drop a message to the coordinator. Okay, no problem. And you will have these notes if you have not received yet. Okay. These are already available for you. Just you need to drop a message. Okay. Now move on to the bigger discussion. External environmental analysis. Before developing a strategy, an organization needs to know what is happening in its external environment. Before developing any strategy, an organization needs to know, the management needs to know what type of changes are happening in the external environment and whether those changes are emerging as opportunities or threats for the organization strategy. Not only this model, this is an interesting point which you can note down. Pastel model not only used to analyze external environment, before developing a new strategy, but can also be used to analyze, to evaluate the impact of changing factors over existing strategy. Over existing strategy. So not only for new strategy, but also for existing strategy as well. What is the purpose of external analysis? Let's have a quick look. Environmental analysis is a part of process of assessing strategic position of the organization. Okay. In order to make strategic choices about the future, the management of an entity need to understand the factors in the environment and that have a significant effect on the entity and what it does. The key drivers of change, these are the factors in the environment that will have the greatest effect on the entity and the force to the entity to change its strategies in order to survive and succeed. So we can highlight this point to know better. The purpose of the analysis means external analysis. The purpose of analysis is to assess the environment. Assess the environment, to analyze the position of an entity in relation to its environment. That is the point. Analyze position of the entity in relation to its environment. What is this? Means where do we stand? This means where do we stand in the changing circumstances? Where do we stand? Are we also in right direction, or we have lost direction in changing circumstances? I have a lot of examples for you to discuss and share on all these points. Okay, so my dear, there are two models part of the syllabus for external analysis. Number one is pestle analysis, and number two is the Porter Diamond model, which we are going to cover now. So first of all, let's start our discussion with pestle analysis. Okay, let's start our discussion with pestle analysis. Pestle analysis. What is pestle analysis? Pestle analysis is a structured approach to analyze the external environment of an entity. Now, please be focused. What is structured approach? Structured. Literally, let me tell you that in SBL, there is a lot of focus on this word. Structure. Okay, I make it simple for you. Structure means SBL answers are expected to be structured, well structured. So now you can understand the broad meanings. Well structured. What is structure? Structure means framework. What this mean? Framework. There should be a framework within that you will use to discuss something. Okay, so if still you are not clear, no problem. We will discuss it very clearly in our coming discussions today. Pestle analysis is a structured approach to analyze external environment of an entity. Structure means focus on key important points. The influences mean current influences and possible future influences of the environment on the entity are grouped into categories. For each category of environmental influence, the main influences are identified. Okay, so Pestle is a structured approach for analyzing external environment. What is this structured approach? Here you can see that in Pestle there are P-E-S-T-E-L, Pestle. So there are basically 6 factors which are analyzed as a part of external analysis. Okay, now let's start. Let's start with P of the Pestle, political environment. Here, what we will look. Here we will look at how the changes in political environment or political landscape or political factors would impact strategy of the organization. How I'm repeating, how the changes in the political environment or political factors would impact strategy of the organization. Okay, how changes in political landscape or political environment would influence strategy. That is a very interesting discussion. How interesting? Because there is a change in the government. When there is a change in the government, or when there is a political stability or instability, it has direct impact on the strategy of the organization. Let's go into the notes and try to find out how it works. The stability of a political system can affect the appeal of a particular local market. First of all, so stability of a government, stability of political system is very important, is key for any market. Okay, why? Because if there's a political stability, it attracts investment, it attracts business organizations, it attracts capital, political stability. But when there is chaos, when there is instability, then capital will move out of that country or that region. Shifts in political environment could have direct impact on business performance. Governments pass legislation which impacts the relationship between the firms and its customers, suppliers, and other companies. Okay, so government pass legislation. So government, the capability of the government, the ability of the government, the policy of the government. So all this affects strategy of the organization. Here I have written few points for you. The organization must react to the changing political landscape, such as government policy shift, or government policy changes and priorities for certain sectors. For example, we see these days all across the globe, especially in Europe, especially in America, there's a lot of focus on electric vehicles. There's a lot of focus on renewable energy. There is a lot of focus on sustainable business models. So what is happening? European governments are allocating billions and billions of euro to support the sustainable ecosystems, to support new startups, to support new projects, to support new strategies of the organization which aim at sustainable development. For example, I gave you e-mobility. In Europe, let's take example of France, for example, or Netherlands, for example. Increasing number of the city governments like Paris, for example, Amsterdam, for example, Copenhagen, for example, Frankfurt, for example. Okay, increasing number of city governments are encouraging their residents, encouraging their citizens to like be more sustainable, to choose more sustainable transportation options. That's why more and more people are like quitting the diesel petrol cars. If they are not purchasing electric vehicles, they are more going like within the cities. You might have seen cycling, for example, is becoming very popular. Cycling, if you have visited like France or any other European country, okay, you might have seen cycling is becoming more and more popular. Increasing number of people are adopting to the bicycles. Okay, so this is on the other side, the governments are providing parallel platforms for public transport, so making the public transport more efficient, more effective, more convenient for the citizens. Understand? This is one way. Other way, like in across the globe, like around the world, governments are encouraging renewable energy. For example, solar, solar, there are subsidies on the solars in a lot of countries in the world. They are offering like the net metering options. They are offering they are making offers to the citizens that the government will purchase the electricity for the grid from them if they install the solar. So the point of discussion here is this is called government policies, government priorities towards. Similarly, more example I can share with you. For example, during the COVID, so increasing number of governments all across the globe, they have more focus on the health and fitness. Okay, more focus on the health in a lot of countries after the COVID. In lot of countries, there is focus on food, for example. Okay, there is a focus on nutrition, for example. There's a focus on public health, for example. Okay, so like in many European countries where there is like they are encouraging their citizens to go on electric vehicles. So that's why they are arranging electric vehicle platforms. Okay, charging station in Germany, for example, in Norway, for example. Okay, governments are installing charging platforms so to facilitate their people. Similarly, in agriculture, for example, in a lot of countries, there's a focus on sustainable agriculture, sustainable development, sustainable agriculture. So governments are giving priority to the sustainable farming. Understand? Sustainable farming. They are offering like low interest or free of interest loans to the new startups, to the farmers who are investing, who are starting the sustainable farming and agriculture. So there are a lot of ways where government can impact. And now this was the one side. If we look on the other side, in China, for example, if you want to purchase electric vehicle, you will get a subsidy from the government. But if you want to purchase a diesel or petrol-based vehicle, mean conventional vehicle, it would be difficult for you to get license or get permit from the government. So they would delay the permit of purchasing a new vehicle. But if you want to buy electric, you would not only get the subsidy, but you will get it quickly. Understand? These are government. This is, I have shared with you one or some aspects of the latest trends in the political. So in all this, and by the way, SBL question can focus on these trends. I can tell you, okay? SBL questions can focus on these trends. Can focus on these trends. Understand? I hope that you are now getting the bigger picture of how political or like government priorities, preferences, policies impact the strategies. Next, I have included a few articles for you if you want to read. Okay, you can just like there is a hyperlink available. So you just click on these and you will have reading of these articles, interesting articles to expand your understanding about how government policies affect strategy of the organization. Move on, next is economic environment. Here we will look at how the economic forces or the economic environment would impact strategy of the organization, or we look at how the changes in economic landscape would impact strategy of the organization. Now, when we talk about economic factors, there are a lot of factors that make part of the economic environment of the organization. Okay, for example, first of all, we can start with the growth of the economy, whether the economy is growing or not. If growing, what is the growth rate? Because when an economy is growing, there is opportunity. But when economy is cooling down or when economy is slowing, that is called recession. That is called recession. And recessionary economies is a threat, for businesses. Growing economy is an opportunity, because in growing economy, what happens? The cycle is simple to understand. In growing economy, people get jobs, income level rise, small businesses thrive. In a growing economy, everyone gets a share of earning. Okay, small businesses thrive, individuals get jobs, understand, and overall there is a flow of capital in the economy. So like there are jobs, there's a rising income, and when people will have income, they will spend, and when they will spend, there will be more demand for goods and services. So imagine there will be like flow of the capital, understand? In this, there are a lot of businesses would have opportunity. On the other side, when the economy is slowing down, opposite happens. There are other factors that impact the business organizations. For example, rate of inflation. These days, across the globe, there is inflation. Prices are rising. Okay, prices are rising all across the globe. So this is a threat. Inflation means the cost of doing business is rising. So cost of doing business rising mean now there will be less profits or reduction in profits. Understand? Then there are other economic factors as well. Level of interest rates, for example. Level of interest rate. These days interest rates are going up. So the financing cost will be higher for business organization. This is another threat. Foreign exchange rate fluctuation. If the local currency is getting stronger, this is good for importers up to a certain extent, exporters. But if the local currency is getting weaker, this is a threat. If the local currency is getting stronger, okay, this is good for imports because imports will become cheaper. But if the local currency is getting weaker against the foreign currencies, this is a threat for imports, but good news for exports if the local currency is devaluating. But up to certain extent, devaluation is okay, acceptable. But if there is a significant devaluation in the currency, this is not good for the economy because inflation will start going up. Understand? So these are complicated and technical economic factors that impact. So business being a businessman, being like a CFO, being like a business manager, you should be aware how the different changes in the economy and different changes in the economic factors would impact the strategy of the organization. Okay, there are other factors. For example, unemployment rate, availability of skilled and unskilled workers, government tax rates, government subsidies, existence of non-existence of free trade between countries such as European Union, for example. So like, are there favorable trade conditions between countries? This would be favorable for the certain industries, certain business sectors, certain markets. So you need to understand, be clear about the impact of all these. Next, social, cultural, and demographic environment. PES, social environment. How social environment impact strategy of the organization. Okay, and it also has direct impact. An entity is affected by social and cultural influences in the countries or regions in which it operates, and by social customs and attitudes. Some influences are more significant than others. Factors in the social and cultural environment include the following. For example, lifestyle. What? Lifestyle. Lifestyle of customers, or lifestyle of the public, attitudes of the public, beliefs of the customers, employees, and general public. All these have impact on their purchasing patterns, their purchasing behavior. Patterns of work and leisure. For example, these days, we know there is a rise after COVID, we have seen the work from home culture. Work from home culture, okay, this trend has affected, and still a lot of companies and businesses are still trying to be normal, come to the normal point. Even now, although this trend is still continuing, because businesses are encouraging their customers, businesses are encouraging their employees to work from home in a lot of industries. Okay, so like ethnic structure of the society, influence of religion and religious attitudes in society, relative proportions of different age groups in society, all these have impact on strategy of the organization. Cultural influences such as taste of individuals, customers, lifestyles, okay, all these have impact on the strategies of the organization. So next is the technological influences, technological environment. We know we are living in fast changing technology era, and this virtual class is another example of this point, that how the world is moving fast, technology is moving fast. Rapid changing technology environment requires organization to remain updated with the latest developments and aware of what is going on. For example, today we are talking about the new technologies such as Meta, for example. Okay, Meta, for example, or we are talking about AR, VR technologies. We are talking about Internet of Things. We are talking about cloud, for example. We are talking about automation. We are talking about robotics, and a lot of technologies such as artificial intelligence. So all these machine learning, okay, all these are the technologies which are impacting the business organizations, although the impact vary from industry to industry. In some industry, the impact is significant, impact is huge, but in the other industries, the impact would be minimum. Okay, but every industry and every sector is getting affected. Every industry, for example, e-commerce, every organization now need its social media platforms. Every organization needs to have its presence, okay, social media platforms, but it again vary from industry to industry. Okay, some industries, for them, the social media platforms, the e-commerce is becoming key, but for other industries, they may not be able to adapt it fully. Okay, all these topics SBL papers have tested. So my dear, you need to be clear how these topics are linked with SBL paper. Okay, technological change can affect the activities of organization in a number of ways. For example, type of products or services that are made and sold. Technology is affecting. For example, think of cars, for example. Think of cars. Today, cars are equipped with more sensors than ever before. More sensors. There are sensors like which are like monitoring the tire health, tire conditions. There are sensors which are connected with the GPS. There are sensors which are checking performance of others. There are sensors which are connected with the engine. There are dozens of sensors installed in a car. This was not the situation before. Why? Because now the car manufacturers, the tire manufacturers, the electronics manufacturers, they are collecting data from those sensors about how their products are functioning, how customers are using their products. Understand? So products are becoming more and more technologically intensive. Okay, technologically intensive products. Okay, so even you want to buy a like oven, for example, you want to buy, even imagine you want to just buy a water bottle, for example. These days, these water bottles are coming with sensors. Imagine if you have a like smart watch, okay, what type of data about your fitness, about your health, about your movement, that watch is collecting and sending back to the manufacturers. Okay, and on that basis, they are collecting data, and then they are developing new products and new services. So this is interesting about technology. The way in which products are made, for example, production techniques, we know that these days there's a more modern manufacturing, 3D printing. You have heard about 3D printing, you have heard about like robotics-based manufacturing. So there is a massive transformation, massive shift, massive changes going on in the production technologies. The way in which services are provided, for example, e-booking, online shopping, the way in which firms are managed, okay, remote management, for example, the way firms communicate internally and externally, the way of communication, okay, reporting, business reporting has changed, technology has changed business reporting. For example, we now use ERPS, enterprise resource planning systems we are using, which are integrated softwares, which are integrating the different functions and different departments of the organization, different divisions of the organization, where integrated data is available. We are now more and more using the data warehouses, data mining softwares, data analytics softwares. So all this is because of ERPS. So the way in which products are sold, particularly the growth of e-commerce, the way in which the firm connect, acquire, engage with its customers, all these are now influenced by technologies. All this is influenced by technologies. You should be clear about this. And SBL paper would test your knowledge in these areas. So you need to develop your knowledge. You need to develop your understanding that how modern organizations operate. Next, ecological factors. Let's talk about nature. The changing climate will bring many challenges for society and business, some which are known now and some which it may be difficult to predict. Some now and some difficult to predict. And this is happening right now. This is happening right now. In some parts of the world, there are heavy rains, there are floods. In the other part of the world, there are rising temperature, droughts. Even in South Asia, you might have heard, okay, there was massive heat wave in the month of Feb and March. When it is springtime, Feb and March, there was summer. So weather patterns have changed. Summers are coming early. Monsoon in Pakistan and India, monsoon comes generally in August, but this time it has started in July. One complete month. In Pakistan right now, the monsoon is, you might have watched and heard in news, the Karachi city is underwater. You might have heard about these type of news, okay? So a lot of cities, there's a massive rains are falling, and the overall there is disruption because of the rains and resulting the flood type of situation. Understand? Okay, so the monsoon have come 1 month earlier. Imagine how this would impact business organizations. Especially let's talk about those businesses which are dealing in agriculture and food, for example. Agri and food sectors, for example. Okay, so there would be massive impact on the crops. These rains, these consistent rains are good for some crops. For example, sugarcane, for rice, these are good, but these are not good for other crops. Okay. Even there are problems about the fodder. Lot of issues result from when there's a change in the climate. So the point here is, it is critical for the leadership management to determine and recognize the impact and consider in strategic planning and decision making. That is the point. That is the point. This is called considering sustainable or sustainability related issues in the strategy of the organization. Note it down, note it down, note it down. Are you taking notes, my dear? Are you taking notes? Okay, we are at the point where we need to consider now the sustainability related issues into the strategic planning of the organization. Strategic planning. Okay, strategic planning. So this is not the conventional, traditional planning or strategy. Even now, the strategy requires you to think of strategic sustainable development. Okay, increasing number of companies are now presenting themselves as environmental friendly. If you look at Standard & Poor or other rating agencies, you will look at how the companies are adopting to the sustainable practices. ESG, you might have heard about ESG rating now. There is hundreds of billions of investments are going into the ESG business models, those businesses which are considering environmental, social, and governance factors. They are attracting new investments, they are attracting new capital. So there is a massive shift in the way we do business. Okay. All right. Increasingly, companies are transforming their business models, adopting sustainable business practices, and becoming carbon neutral, cutting emissions from their operating activities. Wow, it's a very beautiful line which you can highlight. Now, let's talk about that. How means we are talking about environmental or ecological environment. There are two aspects, or we can look at the situation from two aspects. One is impact of climate change on business performance, and then other side, impact of poor environmental practices on business performance. Let's talk about first impact of climate change on business performance. Unpredictable weather can affect business performance directly or indirectly. This can cause significant disruption to businesses, leading to higher cost of capital and make it more difficult to get insurance. This is the one side of the story. Think like in Mauritius, for example. Heavily rely on tourism. What happens when there are torrential rains? What happens? What happens when there are torrential rains? Or, for example, because all the resorts are located on the beach sides, understand, in Mauritius. So you just imagine if there is rising sea level, for example, just like as Maldives, for example. Have you heard that Maldives is sinking? Have you heard about? My dear, have you heard about Maldives is sinking? Rising sea levels. Okay, so imagine the tourism industry. Maldives depend on tourism industry. Other regions of the world, for example, like Bali, for example, Thailand, for example, even Seychelles, for example, depend on tourism. So when there is a change in the climate, there are unusual rains, there are floods, there are droughts. You might have heard about the situation in Cape Town, more than 3 years of drought. Lakes dried up, and ultimately there was rationing of water. Hotels were not allowed to use beyond a certain limit. Cape Town, one of the most touristic city in the world, affected by climate change. Extreme weather conditions, more flooding events, water restrictions, supply chain disruptions, collapse. Climate factors are becoming particularly important for industries that depend on earth-based inputs, raw materials, earth-based raw materials, such as water, for example. Facing high climate risk, subject to strict environmental regulations or risk of stricter legislation in the future. Faced with the risk that their sources of raw materials will be used up, for example, parts of fishing industry and timber production industry. At the leading edge of technological research, such as producers of genetically modified foods. Now let's talk about if an organization has poor environmental performance, how it would impact its strategy. Okay, with poor environmental performance, how it would impact its strategy. There are so many ways in which an organization's strategy would be affected because of the poor environment. And this can be tested in SBL paper. And yes, it has been tested in the past papers. SBL, the real business paper. There are a lot of ways. For example, first of all, there would be fines, penalties, and taxes imposed on the business. Even the license can be cancelled if there are severe environmental damages done by the organization. There would be protests, there would be boycotts of the products. Okay, even in the worst case scenario, the business may go out. Okay, business may be shut down because of the poor environmental practices. So this is very important, very important. There are rising risks and the risk landscape has changed. Okay, risk landscape has changed. So rising risks, environment or ecological factors, eco factors need to be considered in strategy. Okay, and the last point, here I have included a small case for your reading: corporate financial environmental performance and financial distress evidence from Australia. You can read it. This is for self-reading. The last factor of environmental or PESTEL is legal environment. Legal environment. The legal environment consists of law and regulations affecting an entity and the possibility of major new law or regulation in the future. Yes, law or regulation or regulatory changes also has direct impact on the strategy of the organization. So management should be clear. Management should be updated with the latest developments in the law or regulation, such as you might have heard there's changes in the now IFRS as well. Are you aware of that? Hello? Are you aware of the changes in ISSB, IFRS? The new IFRS S1 and S2. Have you heard about that? My dear, you should respond. That's important. I told you in the first class. Response is very important. Have you heard about these changes or not? Sustainability standards are coming. Okay. So this is a change in the regulation, regulatory changes. And of course, organization has to follow these, understand? But this is not just only. In several countries, there are like regulation, laws are under change, transformation to reflect the latest developments. For example, technology. Okay, for example, data, For example, human rights. So there is a big shift in the legal environment. There is big shift in the regulatory requirements or regulatory environment, whether it is about emissions, whether it is about data, whether it's about big tech, whether it is about emissions. Okay, so there is regulations underway, a lot of other things. Laws and regulations vary between different countries, although international regulation is accepted in certain areas of commercial activity, such as banking. Strategic decisions by an entity might be affected by legal consideration. For example, an international company might locate some operations for tax reasons in country with favorable tax system. Decisions to relocate operations from one country to another could be affected by the differences in employment law in two countries or by new employment legislation. In many industries, companies are faced with environmental legislation or health or safety legislation. Means I told you the overall there is a massive, even leave aside the European and American and developed countries, even in Africa, for example, in Africa, there is shift in the regulatory environment in Africa. All right. So my dear, that's it from the very broad and comprehensive framework on external environmental analysis PESTEL model. That's it. Okay. And before we move on, you must know that SBL questions or tasks don't mention any specific model. Okay, don't mention. It will be your judgment to decide which model to use. So looking at the hints available, looking at the type of information available in the exhibits, you will choose which model to use. SBL questions don't mention any specific model. Okay, all right. So before we move on to the next model, I would like to know if you have any question. You have 1 minute for question. 1 minute for question. Okay, let's start our second model of environmental analysis. This is called Porter Diamond model. This model has other names as well. For example, model for national competitiveness. If we look at the past papers, how this model has been tested, For example, I share with you the requirements of the questions. For example, there was one question which required the candidates to evaluate what factors have contributed to the success of strategy in the particular market. Okay, I can share here for you. What factors have contributed to the success of a business strategy in a particular market? So this model is not like PESTEL. In PESTEL, we analyze the 6 factors from a different perspective. Here, we look at the factors contributing toward the success of a particular industry or a company. This model focuses on factors necessary, required for an industry to thrive or succeed. Okay. So this model looks at different set of factors. Let's start. Porter's diamond model provides an analysis of factors that give a country or region a comparative advantage. Region or a country are comparative. So this is focus on factors. Focus on the point. This focus on factors that give a region or a city or a country or industry or a cluster a comparative advantage. Porter argued that a key to national or regional supremacy in a particular industry is the ability to innovate. This is the point. Ability to innovate. Okay. Firms and industries must innovate to remain successful. A country must encourage innovation in order to retain our national comparative advantage. Porter used our diamond shape to present the factors that create comparative advantage for a country over other countries. Porter argued that the national domestic market plays an important role in creating competitive advantage for companies on a global scale. Companies operating in a strong domestic market can develop competitive strengths. They can then build on the strengths of their home base to extend their business operations to other countries, where their competitive advantage will also apply and help them towards success. So let's learn, according to Porter, what are those factors that give rise to a particular industry or a region. Here I have few examples in my mind to share with you. For example, we can talk about Singapore, for example, or we can talk about Silicon Valley, for example. Okay, Silicon Valley, for example. Or there are a lot of other regions in the world as well that are like hub of particular industries, that are hub for particular industries or particular companies have thrived in those. So according to Porter, there are 4 factors that lead to achieving competitive advantage for industries or for businesses. Number 1, let's start with, first of all, factor conditions. Factor conditions. Number 2, demand conditions. Number 3, presence of related and support industries. And number 4, firm structure, rivalry, and strategy. Means the local firms, their structure, their rivalry means competition, and their strategies. So let's have a look at this very comprehensive and interesting model. First of all, factor conditions. Factor conditions. There are 2 theories of competitive advantage on the basis of the factor conditions or input conditions. One is the economics theory, and the other theory is from Michael Porter. According to the economics theory, it states that if a country or if a region has natural resources, please listen carefully, attentively. According to economics theory, if a region has natural resource, it will have a competitive advantage over other regions or other countries. But this is not true, because there are a lot of natural resources which are extracted from Africa. Even the rare earth materials, even the materials which we are using modern day electric vehicles batteries, such as nickel, such as cobalt, such as cadmium. Okay, these are used in modern day batteries which are used in installed in the electric vehicles. These are extracted from African countries such as Congo. But do you think Congo has a well-established EV or battery industry? Hello? Do you think Congo or diamonds, for example? Most of the diamonds are extracted from Botswana or South Africa. But unfortunately, they have not developed diamond industry. So that even if we talk about oil or gas or other natural materials or forests or fishing, these countries have not developed. So we more believe in the Porter theory. Porter say that, okay, there are 2 types of factors. One are called basic factors. Other are called advanced factors. According to Porter, if a country has basic factors, this may not guarantee achieving competitive advantage. I just share examples with you. But yes, if there are advanced factors, if a country has advanced factor, these can lead a country to achieve competitive advantage. What are the advanced factors? These are such as infrastructure, such as ports and shipping industries, such as airports, such as telecommunication networks, such as information development networks, research and development, technology development, universities and other high-level research institutions. Understand? These are called advanced factors. So according to Porter, basic factors may not guarantee achieving competitive advantage in a particular industry. But yes, if there are advanced factors, these can contribute to achieve competitive advantage in particular industries. Okay, so we can talk about Singapore, for example. When Singapore got independence, it was very poor island. Okay, but Singapore got the right leadership. Lee Kuan Yew, you might have heard. the father of modern Singapore. Transforming a poor nation into world developed and advanced nation. The contribution, the role, the admiration goes to the leadership. How they develop all that. The Singapore miracle is very clear and very visible. Yes, they work on developing infrastructure, world leading infrastructure, world leading technology institutions, world leading universities, and yes, my dear, skilled workforce. One of the world's most productive workforce, Singapore. We are talking about advanced factors. So there are multiple industries in which Singapore is thriving, for example. And by the way, most of the industries in which Singapore is thriving are future industries, such as nanotechnology, such as future food technologies, vertical farming, water technologies, such as future medication, future medical, such as future pharma. There's a lot of research is going on the future medicines, health and fitness industries, construction industries. Yes, they have developed the new startups, the new technologies in construction. Why? Because Singapore had all that constraints. Singapore had all that constraints. So they converted their constraints into competitive advantage. Singapore has small space, but the population of more than above 5 million. So they developed housing. One of the most efficient housing schemes. Low energy housing. Understand? Then Singapore had a problem of water, drinking water. They attracted water startups and developed water technologies, water filter technologies, converting the seawater into drinkable. They had the problem of food. They don't have farms. They don't have land. They depend on other countries such as Malaysia. So they are developing their own farms. They are developing their own fishing farms. They're developing their own protein farms and a lot of other things. I hope you are clear. Factor conditions. Move on. Number 2, demand conditions. According to Porter, it is also important that how sophisticated is the local customer. How sophisticated are the local markets? For example, we talk about health and fitness products. If the local consumers are demanding healthy products, juices, for example, if they are demanding for juices, fresh juices, the local manufacturers, the local beverage companies will develop fresh juices. But if the local customers are demanding more carbonated drinks, they will develop accordingly. Okay, local demand. How sophisticated are the local customers? Got it? Number 3, supported and related industries. Another very important component to achieve competitive advantage is the presence of local and support industries. When I was giving you example of Singapore, Singapore's success is just not because of the businessmen. It's also because of the support institutions, the government, the proactive policy making of the government. You would be amazed. Singapore has already developed their 2050 plan. 2050 plan means how you would see Singapore in 2050. They have surveyed throughout the whole city, all citizens. What Singapore you want in 2050? They surveyed industries, they surveyed companies, businesses, and then they develop a plan. How to transform Singapore for future, how to prepare Singapore for future. Here is the role of the institutions, the role of the universities. You would be amazed. Singapore has world best universities. National University of Singapore, Nanyang Technology University. If you check their ranking, they are in top 20 universities and the best universities in the world in science and technology research. This is called support industry. But not only universities, but there should be support in terms of raw material providers, in terms of other support maintenance industries. If we talk about Silicon Valley, these factors also filled by Silicon Valley. Okay, there are advanced conditions. The best brains in the world are in Silicon Valley. Best brains in the world. There is demand for high-tech products. There are related and support industries, such as there is abundance of capital available. If you come up with a new idea, you can have millions of dollars of investment to work on your idea. There are venture capitalists, okay, who are available, who are willing to invest in your idea, who are willing to take risk in your idea. There are world best universities, Stanford, Columbia, Harvard, MIT, California. So best universities in the world. Understand? All this is support. And then the fourth factor is firm strategy and rivalry. This is also important. The local businesses, what is their strategy? Strategy means whether they are making decisions for the short term or they have the long-term vision. Because if they are making decisions for the short-term money making, that would not serve the purpose of comparative advantage. Okay, because short-term mindset would not invest in research and development. Short-term mindset would not invest in future value drivers. So for this, for long-term success, you need long-term thinking. You need long-term strategy where businesses invest in talent, business invest in skills, business invest in technology, business invest in research and development, etc. This is called the Porter Diamond model. The 4 factors required to succeed and thrive in a particular industry. Number 1, factor conditions. Number 2, demand conditions. Number 3, support industries. Number 4, firm strategy, structure, and competition. More competition, rivalry mean competition. More competition mean more focus on differentiation. Very simple. More focus on differentiation. More focus on differentiation means more effort, struggle, hard work to develop cutting-edge technologies. And more cutting-edge technologies mean thrive, not only in the local market, but in international markets. So there are numerous examples. Take Japanese automakers, Honda, Toyota, Nissan, Mitsubishi, Mazda. How they got international recognition? First, they got success in their home market. First, get success in home market. Then use this success. Then build on home market success to win globally. Any question? My dear, any question do you have? Okay. And then there's the role of the government. Interesting. Role of the government. We cannot exclude the role of the government. Okay, role of the government. If we look at all these four factors, you can find that the government institutions, government support throughout all the factors. Okay, for example, let's start number one. Factor conditions. We talk about advanced conditions. Now, who will develop advanced conditions? Who will develop advanced conditions? Advanced factors. This is the government who would either invest or encourage the private sector to invest in advanced infrastructure. Okay, such as construction of airports, construction of railways, construction of new motorways, construction of new underground rail systems. Okay, government may encourage the private capital to flow in, but government role is policy making. Okay, government role is policy making. Similarly, number two, demand conditions. Again, in demand condition, how the government would develop new law, new regulation. Okay, for example, think of the semiconductor industry, or think of the demand for health and fitness products. How the government encourage the local businesses to develop new products. How the government encourage the local consumers to consume more healthy food and healthy products. Grow your own food. How government market, how government promote. Number three, support industry. Here again, the role of the government. Okay, develop universities, develop research institutions, develop skill centers, develop the whole supply chains. Okay, this is the role of the government to develop and encourage supply chains. For example, we're talking about sustainable development. Okay, how the government make new laws, new regulation, requiring companies and business organizations to behave in a sustainable way. Make regulation to behave in business behavior. Regulation is about business behavior to behave in more responsible way. And then number four factor is context from strategy and rivalry. Again, context. Here again, government encourages business organization to think long term. Think long term, not just short term. So overall, there is role of the government, significant role of the government to play in to help the local industries to thrive and succeed. Okay, I think you don't have a question, and we can take a short break now. Okay, 10 minutes break time, and after 10 minutes, we will start from our next amazing model, analyzing sources of competitive competition in industry. Competition, okay? We will be looking at industry analysis. All right, so you have 15 minutes of 10 minutes of time for your break. See you after 10 minutes from Porter 5 forces model. Okay, see you. Welcome back. So far, we have covered how to analyze external environment of the organization and identifying factors that may impact strategy of the organization. In next, our model number 3, we are going to learn how to analyze a particular industry and competition. How to analyze particular industry and competition. So in this model, you are going to learn something different. Let's start. Industry analysis. This model basically used for industry analysis. An industry consists of suppliers who produce similar goods and services. Within an industry, there may be different segments. An industry segment is a separately identifiable part of larger industry. Companies need to make strategic decisions about industry and industrial segment they intend to operate in, and market or markets in which they will sell their goods or services. So 5 forces model analysis, analyzing industry competition. Michael Porter in book Comparative Strategy identified 5 factors or forces that determine the strength and nature of competition in an industry. I mean, how strong is the competition within the market or industry? When competition in an industry or market is strong, firms must supply their products or services at a competitive price. Why? Because there is a lot of there's a high competition, and cannot charge excessive prices and make super normal profits. If they do not charge the lowest prices, firm must compete by offering products that provide extra value to customers. Yes, there would be 2 conditions. If there is a high competition, either the firms have to sell at a low price, or they have to make differentiation, means some uniqueness in their products. When any of the 5 forces are strong, competition in the market is likely to be strong and profitability will therefore be low. Analyzing the 5 forces in a market might therefore help strategic managers to choose the markets and industries for their firms to operate in. Okay, so there are 5 forces. Number 1 is threat of new entrants. Threat of new entrants. Threat of new entrants. So the strength of this threat depends on the extent to which there are barriers to entry. What is this? Means if there are high barriers to entry, this threat will be low. If there are low barriers to entry, this threat will be high. Let me make it simple for you. Barriers to entry serve as how difficult it is for new players to enter into the industry. So if there are low barriers mean everyone can enter into this industry and market. So of course, the competition will be very high. But if there are high barriers, strong barriers, mean everyone cannot enter into this industry or market. So existing players will keep enjoying high profits because of low threat. Okay, now you might be thinking, okay, what are those barriers, or what factors might serve as barriers to new entrants? So here are the barriers. Number one, economies of scale. Economies of scale mean when existing players are operating at their full capacity or near to the full capacity. So when they are at full capacity or near to the full capacity, what happens? Their average cost per unit would be the lowest one. So average cost per unit low means they are in position to cut price and charge a low profit, or cut margin, or in short, reduce the price. But if there is a new player, of course, new player would not be able to achieve economies in the beginning. It will take time to achieve the economies. So what would happen if a new player enters and existing players drops prices, and at those prices it may not be possible for the new player to compete or charge the same price, so ultimately go out of the business. So this is one barrier. Number two, capital requirements. Some industries would be highly capital intensive. For example, if you want to enter into oil exploration and mining industry, mining, oil extraction, these are very capital intensive. You need billions of dollars to invest first in the infrastructure, into the equipment, into the machinery, and then you will start getting the projects and then making the money. So everyone cannot enter into the mining, oil extraction business. Next is access to supply or distribution channels. Yes, in consumer goods, especially consumer goods, for example. By the way, e-commerce, although has reduced this barrier, but still there is barrier. If you are selling a fast moving consumer good, you need access to supply distribution channels. So if you want to establish your own, that might be too expensive for you. Understand? Next, supplier customer loyalty. If existing brands have loyal customers, if existing businesses have loyal customers, so it would be difficult for a new player to achieve the same loyalty or suppliers. So this would be a barrier. Next, cost disadvantage, independent of scale. Okay, so existing well-established companies would have the cost advantage, already explained. Economies of scale. Economies of scale mean they have the size, they have the volume, and they have the low cost, and they can charge low prices. For the new player would not have the scale, would not have the size, would not have that volume, so may not compete, may not be able to compete. Next, expected retaliation. It also happens, existing players retaliate fiercely or forcefully upon the arrival of new player. How they would retaliate? How would they retaliate? This is my now question to you. And you have 1 minute. Share your opinions, share your thoughts. Actually, this point has been tested in SBL past papers. So now I want you to use your knowledge, push your thinking, and you have 1 minute. Share your thoughts, how existing players may retaliate. You have 1 minute, quick. Okay, good point. Good point. There are multiple ways existing players can retaliate. For example, one way they can drop prices. They can drop prices. Another way, they can start aggressive marketing, aggressive promotion, aggressive marketing. Another way, even they can play the trick of nationalistic trick. For example, if the new player is a foreign company, then existing players who may be the local players, local companies, they may play the trick of nationalism. Or even in extreme, existing players can also, uh, like you can say, drive the government or regulatory authorities as well to use certain tricks or use certain actions. Uh, patents, pretty patents, like if the new player has copied something technology, then they can use this aspect of patent as well. You got the point? If the new player using the some same technology or similar features of the products, okay, or similar thing, then they can take the company into court as well. Okay, you got the point? Good. Next is government regulation. Some industries are protected by the government. Some industries might be regulated industries. For example, in many countries, water is regulated. In many countries, dairy is regulated. Okay. In many countries, utilities are regulated. So these are protected industries. So everyone may be required to get government approval and go through a lot of other government requirements before making entrance into the industry. And then differentiation. Existing players might be having differentiated products. Okay, they might have unique products, and the new players might have ordinary basic products. So it might be difficult for the new player to compete. So overall, these are called barriers to entry. Low barriers to entry mean high competition. High barrier to entry mean low competition, low threat. Next, power of buyers. Yes, my dear. According to Porter, sometimes buyers or customers would be more stronger, would have strong, would have more power than suppliers. Yes, think of in the case of big brands such as Zara, for example, H&M, for example, okay, like Apple, for example, Samsung, for example. These are big companies, huge companies, Nestle, Unilever. So imagine if they are too big. Coca-Cola, their suppliers would be smaller sizes. So buyers would dictate, would drive, buyers would drive their profitability. The power of buyers will be high. Power of buyers will be high. Situations when buyers or customers dictate or drive or influence suppliers. For example, there are few large players in the market. Few large players in the market means there are few customers in the market. For example, large supermarket chains can apply a great deal of price pressure, such as, for example, like in UK, for example, Tesco is the largest supermarket. Okay, so because of its huge size, it can dictate, it can influence its suppliers. Tesco. Okay, This is especially the case where there are large number of undifferentiated small suppliers. Undifferentiated small suppliers mean they are selling common things. They are selling common, simple, common, basic things, okay, such as vegetable sellers, for example, farming businesses. Yes, this is more appropriate example, you can understand better. Okay, small farmers, for example, they are selling vegetables. They are selling vegetables to the supermarket. So these farmers are relatively small, weak, and markets are more powerful. Next, the cost of switching between suppliers is low. For example, from one haulage contractor to another. Yes, when the cost of switching is low, then the buyers will have high power. They can switch between suppliers. Next, the buyer's product is not significantly affected by the quality of the supplier's product. The buyer's product is not significantly affected by the quality of supplier product. Next, buyers earn low profits. Buyers earn low profits, so then they would have more power. Buyers have the potential for backward integration. This is a term you need to understand. Potential for backward integration means the buyer can acquire its suppliers. Buyer can acquire its supplier. For example, I give you example of a paper mill. For example, a paper mill acquires a forest company, because the trees are used in the making of paper. So a paper mill can acquire a forest company, a forest management company. That is called backward integration. Okay. Next, buyers are well informed. For example, having full information regarding availability of supplies and cost of supplier. Cost of supplier. Yes, such as Adidas, Nike, for example, they are well aware of the cost of their suppliers. So they dictate, they drive their profitability, they impact their profitability as well. All right, my dear, next point, power of suppliers. Sometimes suppliers are strong and customers are weak. Okay, power of sellers will be high where there are large number of customers, but few suppliers. There are few suppliers and large number of customers, such as the operating systems, mobile operating system providers. There is Android and there is iOS. So there are only two suppliers of mobile operating system. Android, okay? There is Android and iOS. Or suppliers of chips, for example. Okay, suppliers of chips. Chips mean the semiconductors. Understand? So there are few suppliers in the world that make these semiconductors. I told you in the last class, there is a shortage of chips is underway, is going on. And do you know the largest chips manufacturer in the world? This is SMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, Taiwan-based. This is the largest semiconductor or chips manufacturer company in the world. Okay, so my dear, we are talking about power of suppliers. There are a large number of customers. Next, switching costs are high, mean it would be difficult for a customer to move from one to other. Okay, for example, the app developers, for example. Okay, they are bound to use iOS or Android platforms. They have no third option. Understand? So they depend on these platform providers. By the way, there is an interesting another debate you can start. Disintermediaries and re-intermediaries. Okay, so new suppliers are coming, old suppliers are going out because the new industries are coming. New industries are emerging. Next, number 4 is called threat of substitutes. Yes, my dear. You might have heard the old comparison of tea and coffee. Tea and coffee. But here we are not going to use the same old example of substitutes, tea and coffee. We have more new latest examples of substitutes. Yes, substitute can also become a threat. Understand? So here the situation, threat of substitute is higher. Where? Situations. There is a product for product substitution, for example, fax and postal services. This is too old now, fax and postal service. There is substitution of need, for example, better quality domestic appliances reduce the need for maintenance. There is generic substitution competing for disposable income, such as the competition between carpet and flooring manufacturers. Yes, but if I ask you to give me the latest example from the latest, this 21st century, which 2 substitutes you can share with me? Which latest example you can share with me, other than tea and coffee? Samsung and iPhone, Zora. They are not real substitutes because they are both operating in the same industry. You understand? In substitute mean there would be different industries. Little bit, there would be some differentiation. There were differences. Okay, I can tell you. You can talk about cars. You can talk about cars. Laptop and mobile. They also do not fall into the criteria for differentiation, substitution. No, they are not substitutes. Okay, substitutes, no. So I can give examples such as, yes, now you are on point, Joe. Your point is good. Petrol and hybrid cars, exactly. This is the point. Both are meeting the same need. Both are meeting the same need, but they have their own industry segments. Okay, Zora and Priti, you got the point? They have different segments of industry. Hybrid versus petrol cars. They have separate segments. Although in broader confinement of industry, they are in the auto industry, but when we segment, they have separate segments. Even we can discuss the energy, for example, from wind, solar, and the coal. These are also substitutes, or bio. Okay, biofuels. So these are all substitutes. So these are the latest example. I hope you have understood better. Next, so there is very clear understanding. Let me explain with you. These days, because in the world, there is energy shortages the world is facing, the energy shortage, even we can discuss in the context of the food as well. Food versus energy. Even they also become substitute to each other as well. But there's a very like a long discussion. World is facing the energy problem, so the world is shifting more towards the solar, from coal or from import-based materials to more locally sourced materials. Understand? So substitutes industries are thriving. That's a very interesting discussion. I need to write an article. That's why I am writing this title. Number 5, competitive rivalry among existing. Competitive rivalry among existing. Competitive rivalry is likely to be high where there are number of equally balanced competitors of a similar size. Competition likely to intensify as one competitor strives to attain dominance over another. So when the existing players or existing competitors are of equal size. Number 2, the rate of market growth is slow growth market. So what would happen? They will try to get the share from others. Number 3, there is a lack of differentiation. Lack of differentiation means the different players or different competitors, they are selling basic products, selling basic products. Now here I pause and need your input. Which industry you can relate this point? Which industry, which type of products you can relate to this point? That when there's a lack of differentiation, there will be high competition. Now I stop and wait for your response. Give the example of an industry where there are basic products, so there will be high competition. In Mauritius, you can look around. Yes, good point. Bottled water. Good. Is there anyone who can come up with another example? Look into your kitchen or some other home care products. Some other home care products. I think Preeti in oil, there is some segmentation. It's not in oil. Rice. Yes. Yeah, up to some extent, oil we can consider. I think in Mauritius, the largest market share is more oil. If I am not mistaken, more oil. Chandrima, yes, you are right. Rice is kind of basic product. And more, like cleaning chemicals, cleaning, floor cleaning, for example. Floor cleaning products. Are these basic or differentiation? Are there basic or differentiation floor cleaning products? Do you know why I ask you these questions? There is a skill called commercial acumen. Commercial acumen. This is one of the skill required from you to develop. And my questions, I ask you to develop this skill. Understand? That's why I encourage you to participate. This skill is very important, and normally students don't understand it very well. Commercial acumen. Commercial acumen means you need to know the viability, the feasibility, the suitability of your idea. What you are suggesting, whether that makes sense, means whether your recommendation or suggestion makes sense within the given context. This is called commercial acumen. So you are required to develop this. That's why I encourage you to give your input. Air fryer. Air fryer. Yes. Good example. Good example. That's why, my dear, I encourage you to participate. Okay, commercial acumen skill you need to develop. Okay, we are talking about the competitive rivalry, means situations where the competition among existing companies would be very strong or very high. Next, industry has high fixed cost. Industry has high fixed cost, perhaps as a result of capital intensity, which may precipitate price wars and hence low margins. High fixed cost and low margins, where capacity can only be increased in large increments requiring substantial investment. Then the competitor who takes up this option is likely to create short-term excess capacity and increase competition. Next, there are high exit barriers. Exit barriers mean it would be difficult to get out of the industry or the market. Why? Because there are certain high barriers. This can lead to excess capacity and consequently increased competition from those firms effectively locked into particular marketplace. Now again, here I pause, I stop, and I want you to share your thoughts on what do you think of exit barriers. Please share your thoughts. share your input about exit barriers, high exit barriers. What do you think of these high exit barriers? Quick. 1 minute you have. And you must come up with some idea. Okay, very good point. Very good point, Preeti. Labor contracts. Labor contracts. Good point. Labor contracts. Long-term contracts with landlords. Okay. Labor contracts. Landlord, or protected by the regulation, government. Understand, there would be high cost of exit. There would be penalties. Highly specialized assets which may be difficult to sell. Yes, very good point. You, very good point. Joe says, highly specialized assets which may be difficult to sell or relocate, or there would be no customer for that. Very good point. Very good point. Okay, my dear, thank you very much for your wonderful input. Wonderful input. Very good. This is the way. The discussion, this is you are participating and you are discussing. This is the way you can develop more commercial acumen, more analysis, more evaluation, and of course you are improving your communication, and you will ultimately improve your skepticism as well. So 5 skills for SBL. Good. Number 5th force also is government. It can also be considered as government as well, because government policy making, government regulation, law also impact the 5 forces as well. But overall, these are the 5 forces. I hope you are clear. Let's have a quick look at the 5 forces that determine the level of competition in an industry. Number 1 is the threat of new entrant. Threat of new entrant depends upon barriers to entry. Low barriers means high threat. High barriers mean low threat. Number 2 is the threat of substitutes. Threat of substitutes. Higher the substitutes, more effective substitutes, more value adding substitutes means high threat. That's like, as for example, these days the world is moving towards renewable energy, solar, coal, wind, hydro, bio. So coal, conventional sources of energy, suppliers are under threat. Understand? Then there's a power of buyers. When customers are strong, they will dictate prices, they will dictate supply, they will dictate quality, and hence impacting the profitability of the suppliers. Then there are customers, then sometimes customers, first suppliers, then customers, power of customers. Customers can also dictate these things, and suppliers. Okay, and then the 5th number is competitive rivalry among existing firms. Okay, if there are large number of competitors, competing in the same industry, okay, if there are many competitors, if they are selling basic products, if there are high exit cost, if there are high fixed cost, okay, they will start competing with each other on price wars. So this is called five forces. Any force, presence of any force means there is high competition. So I hope you are very well clear. You have 1 minute for question. 1 minute for question. Here is a summary of different forces of competition for your view. Okay, self view. You have 1 minute. If you have any question, you can ask. I have included a lot of examples, lot of industry cases, just to improve your understanding and give you commercial acumen. Okay. Then there are activities which you can try and you can discuss with me. Any question on competition and competitive forces? Any question? You have 1 minute. Okay, you can also ask me question in the WhatsApp group as well. WhatsApp group is already formed, and you can ask me your questions in the WhatsApp group, where we will be discussing, we will be sharing thoughts, we will be discussing different ideas, different latest industry developments, and how these can be fit into the SBL. So all these discussion will be in the WhatsApp group. Okay, topic model number 4, analyzing and mapping customers and markets. So far, we have been learning about external environmental forces and competition forces. Now we are going one step further. Here we want to analyze suppliers and customers. The purpose is to identify space. Space. What is space? Let's start. When all the companies in an industry are put into strategic groups, all companies in industry put into strategic groups, and these groupings are analyzed, a strategic space might become apparent. Strategic grouping of different suppliers or competitors. A strategic space is a gap in the market that is not currently filled by any strategic group. Existence of strategic space might provide an opportunity for a company to make a strategic initiative and attempt to fill the space that no other rivals occupy. There are many ways of identifying strategic groups within an entire market. For instance, a market can be classified to identify the position of existing players in terms of price. Yes, grouping, strategic grouping or groups can be formed on the basis of price, on the basis of quality, on the basis of geographical presence, on the basis of customer perceived value, or on the basis of the range of products. Okay, so these are the different way where you can group the existing players. For example, let's take example in education or in health industry. Okay, let's talk about education. For example, in Mauritius, you want to set a skilled institution. You want to set a future skilled institution where you want to offer AI, machine learning, coding, data analytics courses. Okay, data analytics courses. Now you want to scan the whole market in Mauritius. You will look at, okay, how many colleges and institutions they are providing skills. Okay, you will group, okay, this skill, this skill, this skill, this skill. Then you will go further narrow and now look at how many players or how many colleges are providing AI, coding, data analytics, gaming skills. Okay, you will identify, okay, these are the 2 colleges in this region. For example, one is in Triano, for example, okay, or in the Redvi, or another part. One is in the Port Louis, for example, and you see there is no college in the Cupid area, okay, or no college in the north on the Grambe side, or no college on the east side, on the flag side, or no college on the west side, flick and flag side. So you can establish a skilled institution in any area where you find there is a space. This is the one way. Or you can also identify, for example, there's no player. You've identified there's no player offering coding classes, coding for school kids. Okay, you can also group like this way as well, coding for school kids. So you can, this is the space. This, for example, there's no one, no college, no institution offering this. So this is called strategic space. You can fill this space. You can start with offering and then expand. Keep in mind, you need to start with niche. What? Niche. And then expand your platform. Expand your, you need to start with small and expand. Got it? My dear. So there are 2 ways to identify space. 2 ways to identify space. Also called gap. Number 1 is called strategic grouping, where you group or classify or categorize suppliers. Okay, this is called market segmentation. A market segment is a section of the total market in which the potential customers have certain unique, that is called strategic grouping. Okay, the second tool is called market segmentation. In market segmentation, you group or categorize customers into different categories. You classify customers into different categories. For example, here, in this table, I have categorized customers into 6 groups or 6 classification or 6 categories of customer. We can divide customers on the basis of geographic, demographic, psychographic, behavioral, persona, and predictive. On this basis, you can identify strategic space, mean whether geographic, mean where customers are. You can identify different regions. Demographic, who What is the demographic? Mean who is that? Who is the customer? Psychographic. Why? Why is the customer purchasing? Why? Behavioral. What is purchasing? Persona. Who, what, why, where, combination. Predictive. Who and when. When, next. So on that basis, you can analyze. It's a very interesting table for your understanding of market segmentation and identify strategic space. I hope you would be clear it, and we are moving on. Next topic. But before I move on to next topic, scenario planning, I would like to know if you have any question. If you have any question, my dear. Okay. So this is the last topic of our external analysis. So far, we have been studying about external factors affecting strategy of the organization. But when we are working on external environment, and we have identified there are certain factors which are changing, and these factors may impact our business model and strategy. Okay, all right. When analyzing external environment, we identify certain factors changing, for example, pestle factors or competition factors. Then we need to evaluate how these changes would impact our business model, and strategy. Okay. Next, we need to build scenarios. All right. So I hope you are understood basics. Move on. What is a scenario? When the business environment is highly uncertain, this is the point. Uncertain mean dynamic. Uncertain mean dynamic environment. Dynamic, constantly changing. It may be impossible to develop a single view of how environmental influences might impact on the organization strategy, might impact on the organizational strategy. Okay, and business model. Thus, it might be useful for managers to envisage a number of alternative futures. These alternative futures are described in scenarios. Alternative future. When we see there are changes, there are shifts, and we are not clear how these changes may evolve, we need to look for alternative futures. Okay, scenarios are detailed and plausible view of how the business environment might develop in the future, based on different assumptions about key environmental influences and drivers for change within the industry or market itself. All right, so here is scenario development process. Scenario development process. My dear, although there are 5 steps, 6 steps in scenario development process, but here I have tried to make it simple for you. Just 4 steps in scenario development. Although in some books you may find 5 or 6 stages as well, but you can follow this simple process. How to develop scenarios? How to develop scenarios? How to develop scenarios? Step number 1. Identify drivers and impact. Drivers and impact. What are the drivers? These drivers are the external environmental drivers. For example, political. For example, ecological, technological, legal, social, economic, competition, competitors, customers, suppliers, government, drivers, and how they can impact. So step number 1, situation analysis. Step number 1, situation analysis. Once you have identified the key forces, the key factors, and how they can impact, you move to stage number 2. Now project and assess key drivers, trajectories. Trajectories means their dimensions, mean where they can go, what course this factor may follow. For example, if there is change in the economy, you can try to forecast or predict where this may go. For example, inflation. All across the globe, inflation is a problem these days. So you can develop a path, a trajectory up to what extent this inflation may go, or what would be the worst outcomes. Assess. Got it? So you have developed trajectories. Number 3, calculate consistent, distant combinations. For example, these are called scenarios. So in number 3, you relate or connect different points. For example, if inflation keep rising, your cost will also go up. If inflation go up, your cost of doing business will go up. When cost of doing business will go up, what other problems would follow? So calculate consistent and distant combinations. You need to connect different variables or different drivers. Scenarios, develop scenarios. Number 4, implications. Now you have to plan your response, or in other words, this is not response, proactive measures. Plan your purpose and strategy. Mean you need to work on how will you prepare, how will you plan, how will you respond if that scenario realizes. If scenario number 1 materializes, if scenario number 2 materializes, if scenario number 3 materializes, if scenario number 4 materializes, what will be your response? And by the way, don't make a lot of scenarios. Listen attentively. Don't make a lot of scenarios. This is, we are going to discuss here. When developing scenarios, when developing scenarios. My voice is clear? Hello, my dear. Is my voice clear? Can you hear me clearly? Is my voice clear? Good. Perfect. Thank you. When developing scenarios, what factors you need to consider? Keep the number of influencing factors limited. Limited maximum 3 to 4. How many? 3 to 4. For example, if you have developed 8 scenarios, what may happen? Or if you have developed 10 scenarios, what may happen? It would become too difficult, too complex, and you may lose the focus. Business may lose the focus from very important to least important. So this is the point. Keep the number of influencing factors limited to a few significant. Significant means most important, so that the analysis does not become too complex. Number 2, it is also preferable to focus on factors which are largely out of control of the organization. This is the point. You need to focus on those factors which are out of the control of the organization, because scenarios are the factors which are beyond the control. Organization can influence its own behavior and expertise. Next, number 3. It is recommended that managers should develop contingency plans. Contingency plans or strategies for each unfolding scenario. Mean, if this happens, for example, if there is a power cut, for example, there is a torrential rain, and it is expected, rains are expected for next whole week, there would be flood kind of situation, flood situation. So in that, the power may be out, the power may be off. So power is very important for your factory. You are running a textile mill, for example. Power is very important. So in case power is cut, what is your backup? Contingency plan. Okay, Johnson, Scholes, and Whittington have also suggested that sharing and debating these scenarios improve organizational learning by making managers more perceptive about the forces in the business environment and what is really important. It's a very beautiful line, very beautiful line. Sharing and debating means you need to talk, you need to communicate, you need to involve, you need to encourage everyone within the organization to let them know, let them be clear about the changing circumstances, about the changing drivers. They should be clear about the changing forces, okay? So they can prepare better. They can come up with good ideas. Sharing and debating, okay? Consumers' data might help establish a statistical relationship between spending in the market sector and changing economic indicators, such as inflation or slowing economic growth. So there would be certain data sets that can help you to forecast the future. For example, the consumer purchasing patterns can give you some idea about if there's inflation. So how consumers are reacting. Are they saving? Are they cutting their spending? And if they are spending, or what type of like goods they are purchasing? Are they purchasing the basic necessities? Are they purchasing the basic grocery? Are they, what type of purchasing they are making in situation of rising prices? This would help managers predict impact on the strategy and product demand in different scenarios. Okay, my dear, so this is about very interesting topic of scenario development. Scenario development. I hope you are clear on this. Here is activity 3. which you can try, and you can share the answer with me if you would like me to check and mark. And that's about our external analysis. All the topics, the areas which are part of external analysis, we have done it today. In next class, we will be starting from internal analysis. So in our next class, our focus will be on value chain, resource and capabilities analysis, SWOT analysis, strategic choices, corporate level strategy, developing alternative directions for growth, methods of strategy development. Means in next class, we are going to complete our strategy section. In next class, last topic, evaluation of business strategies. In next class, we will complete the strategy section. Okay, so I would encourage you to have a read of topics. That is very good, very effective to read before the class what topics you are going to cover. Okay, take your notes, write your questions, and ask me. All right, that is a very effective approach. And you are learning SBL. SBL requires you to have effective planning. So my dear, that's it from our today class. I hope you have enjoyed our today class. I hope that all the topics we have covered today, you have very well understood. Bit my pace, I kept my pace bit slow today because you are still catching up with my style. You are still catching up with my speed. So that's why I kept the speed, pace bit low. So what do you think? Can I increase the pace a little bit more in the next classes? Or should I keep the same pace? What do you think? Should I keep the same pace or little bit increase in next class? Please openly share your thoughts. This is your class. This is your class, and I have to follow the best practice that suits you. Do you think we should maintain the existing style, pace, or we should make a little bit more fast? Okay, so some students are suggesting, yes, bit fast. Some suggesting keep same. Okay, yes. Narayanan, no problem, because I have to definitely, the focus is to maximize your learning. So I will follow what you will follow. Preeti says mixture. Okay. All right. Okay, no problem. Same pace, no problem. Thank you very much. Yes, we can keep the same pace, no problem. So now I will share few articles with you in the WhatsApp group that you will have some reading. in the WhatsApp group, okay? Plus, these notes will be available for you. So you will have the revision, please. It's important. Please schedule your studies. That is very important. This is the last message of the day. Plan and schedule your daily routine. Plan and schedule your daily routine and your studies if you want success. Thank you very much, all of you, for your wonderful participation in the class, for joining class. I hope everything you have learned today, you have enjoyed, and looking forward to see you on the next Saturday. Okay, now we will keep in touch in the WhatsApp group for some interesting news and article sharing so you can learn more. So thank you very much. Have a very beautiful weekend and a very beautiful evening. And thank you. Bye.